So I just finished Ender's Game just now. Um, I'm teaching an English class, and I assigned this as the book that all of my students had to read. Um, they mostly hated it, as students typically do. But I don't know, I kind of liked it. Um, I read this book a long time ago when I was pretty young. I think I was in like sixth grade the first time I read this book. And I guess reading it again has been a really interesting experience because I don't know, a lot of stuff kind of went over my head. I think when I read it the first time as an 11-year-old, uh, a lot of mainly the things that stuck with me were like the violence and the battles that happened, like the actual details of how the protagonist rises to power. And now rereading it as an adult, there's a very clear religious theme throughout the entire book, which is interesting because religion is. It's interesting that that's one of the main themes because religion doesn't really play a very large role in the setting of the book. Like religion is banned on Earth, and there are you're not like supposed to be religious, although people sometimes do it. And I would say for every one time religion comes up, there are like 10 times that, random interpersonal violence comes up. So it's I don't know, it's interesting artistically that something that comes up so infrequently can, at least to my mind, be one of the main, like most important themes of the book. Um, yeah, I guess I'd like to just have a think about how it is that something can be so important to a work without it like coming up all that frequently. Because I think what is happening here is that the violence is sort of spoken to by the religious theme, if that makes sense. Like all of this interpersonal violence comes across as so senseless and so wasteful and so horrible. And so in that context, even mentioning religion, just in passing, is so much more meaningful than another scene of someone like beating the shit out of someone else for no reason. Anyway, I guess I should probably explain what's actually in the book before I start talking about it more. So, Ender's Game is a sci-fi book by this absolute freak, Orson Scott Card. Um, I read it when I was 11 because I had a creative writing teacher who thought I was really smart and was like, "Oh, you would really like this book." And now I'm reading it again as a teacher. I've assigned it in class. Um, anyway, so the setting of the book is um, Earth post alien invasion. These aliens came and invaded us, called the Buggers. I don't remember if they invaded once or twice, but they came, they showed up, they fucked our shit up. It's a complete miracle that Earth wasn't completely destroyed. And so now, in relatively short order, it's not really explained how this happens, but Earth becomes like a global government or near global government. There are some factions. There's something called like the Second Warsaw Pact or something like that, and then there's something called the hegemony. It's basically very much like a Cold War type situation, but extended across the entire world. Like there's no third world. Um, in the future. There's only the hegemony and the Second Warsaw Pact. And the hegemony, I guess we don't know what the Warsaw Pact is doing, but the hegemony, which controls most of the world, is putting all of their resources and all of their effort into preparing for a second alien invasion, or a third one. They're preparing for another one, is the point. And as a part of that preparation, they've decided uh, to have like a battle school where they find kids from a very young age and they train them like they're looking for their like future commander. Um, and so the book follows this character Enderwigan, who there's a global two-child policy in this setting, which is kind of interesting. His parents were given permission to have a third child because the first kid was very promising but was too violent, kind of a sociopath. The second kid also promising but too empathetic. She was just too nice to be a global commander. Um, and the third kid, our protagonist, is just right. And the story starts when he's 6 years old, and he basically gets selected. And the selection process is that they tell him that he flunked out, and they want to see what he'll do. And he's got this monitoring chip that can enables people to like see through his eyes. And by the way, full spoilers ahead. Like, stop listening if you don't want to know what happens in Ender's Game. Um, and they remove the monitoring chip, and Ender immediately starts getting bullied in school. Like, he's already kind of a freak. Um, every figure, like, it's very clear that this guy's really, really special and really, really unique. And like, honestly, if you were one of his classmates, you would want to kick this kid's ass too. Um, so he immediately starts getting bullied, and part of the test is what happens when he gets bullied. And he's getting pushed around by this kid Stilson, and it's a really like telling and important moment in the book. But he like not just retaliates against Stilson, but retaliates with overwhelming brutality. This kid is like 6 years old, and he like cracks Stilson's skull. Like, this kid is going to the ER immediately, and this is a fight between 6-year-olds. So right away, I think that supports my thesis statement that Ender's Game is a freak ass book from a freak ass writer for freak ass readers, because the first like interesting event in this book is like 6-year-olds engaged in lethal violence. Um, it's weird. Like, I actually don't know what to make of like the overwhelming violence enacted by children. Um, it's gross and disturbing, and I don't know. No wonder I loved this book so much. I couldn't stop, thinking about that. You'll find out much later. So Ender is totally messed up about this. Oh, and I should explain the logic of responding with overwhelming force. Um, is that Ender doesn't just want to win this fight. He wants to win all the future fights before they even happen. Um, which I guess makes a lot of sense. It's kind of a life motto that I could imagine Jordan Peterson explaining. Um, and so Ender and other situations like this come up, but the underlying logic of not just defending yourself, but preemptively defending yourself against future violence that may or may not actually be coming is very important to the book. It's a sort of dramatic situation that comes up 3 or 4 times, and Ender's central role in the story is that he is willing to be the guy who takes it all the way, takes it just way beyond where any normal person would take it. He wants to win. He doesn't just want to win this war, he wants to win all the future wars before they even happen. And the book basically indicates that this is the quality that makes him the ideal commander for Earth's defense force. And you might have figured out, like, that is not really. I mean, even though it arises from a need to defend yourself, that is not really a defensive strategy. That's a sort of like that's the idea of like the best defense is a good offense, right? And so anyone who is paying very close attention, I wasn't paying very close attention, but anyone who's paying really close attention to this theme will sort of start to notice that, like, they're clearly not training Ender to play defense here. They're training Ender to not to win this war, but to win all the future wars before they even happen. And it turns out that's exactly what they're doing. They're not training Ender to defend the Earth. They're training Ender to command an invasion force of his own that's going to go to the homeworld of the aliens and destroy it before they can think of invading us again. And one feature that's really interesting about this book, actually, I want to talk about another theme first. which is the theme of disorientation. I've been talking about this with my students, and I don't think very many of them understand it. Um, it comes up a lot, like weirdly a lot, that in zero gravity, so like in space, there is no longer an objective sense of up and down. You know, up can be down can be up, left can be down. Anywhere you can orient yourself in any direction that you want, and any of those is equally valid because there's no gravity to say this is down, this is up. And Ender's ability, I want to say he's reorienting himself, but it's more like unorienting. He's unorienting himself. One of the things that he does that makes him like such a good commander, that makes him better than all of the others, is that he recognizes that the orientation that you take, like quite literally in physical space, where you call up and where you call down, is completely subjective. It's up to you. And I feel like this is a very like almost postmodern point to be making because Ender's ability is one of Ender's like abilities that makes him such a good commander is that he recognizes the complete subjectivity of orientation in zero gravity. And this sort of reflects, and I don't quite know what to make of this, but this is clearly the direction that Orson Scott Card is taking this motif. It reflects a profound moral, I guess what I'm calling unorientation as well, where what we decide is moral and is immoral is not exactly subjective, not exactly purely subjective, but it's goal oriented. Like we decide what we call morality and what we call immorality based on what we're trying to accomplish. And in the case of this book, what we're trying to accomplish is the survival of the human race, um, which, in the context of a preemptive strike against an alien species, basically leads to this bizarre, like, reorienting of morality in which not only is genocide like necessary, but genocide is like the profoundest moral virtue that one can accomplish. Um, Really weird book. And the thing is that the thing that I think makes it even weirder is that Orson Scott Card never really like comes out and says like, and all this stuff is bad. Like he just sort of presents the situation. And I don't know, maybe this is just something about how writing has changed since the 80s that like on some level I expect him to spoon feed me the moral of the story. Because clearly this sort of like interstellar genocide is not like good, but it still makes me really uncomfortable that Orson Scott Card presents it like completely neutrally. Okay, so some other things. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, so this logic of winning. There's two logics that I think come up in the book a whole lot. One is winning not just this battle but all the future battles, and this unorientation that Ender is able to slip into. And I think those two things are there. There might be some other ones. Um, the book also mentions his empathy as being crucial for his development as a commander, but I honestly don't see it that much in the book. Like the point that the book is making is totally correct, which is that empathy is not just like a pussy bitch boy like feeling someone else's feelings type of emotion. It's also a way to like anticipate the movements of your enemy, and that is like a very important characteristic in a commander. But the problem that they run into is that anyone who has sufficient empathy for their purposes does not want to commit interstellar genocide. um, and so the solution, big spoilers up ahead. If you're even thinking about reading the book, maybe do that first. I don't know. Um, the solution that the hegemon, that the nearly global government has come up with, is just to convince Ender that it's all a game. And the way that they do this is they start training him on games that actually are games, and then they move him up a level. And they say, okay, this is a new type of game that's more complicated and that's going to prepare you for your future role as a commander. But actually, that new game is just him doing it for real. This new game is just him commanding the interstellar fleet. And in that context, I mean, I think this book recognizes something that is, I don't know, quite interesting, which is that while playing a video game, everyone is a sociopath. Like, while playing a video game, it is totally possible to divorce humanity and your like actual emotions and all that squishy, gay stuff, to completely divorce that from um, what your objectives and your goals and all that good stuff. So Ender is essentially made to act like a sociopath. He's tricked into becoming a sociopath in the context of these goals, so that humanity can commit an interstellar genocide, and he succeeds. The buggers are completely wiped out, and Ender, of course, feels super duper messed up about this. Um, as you would. I think he correctly sees this as the sort of culmination of his training. Like, he understands that they've been turning him into a good little sociopath, and that despite his ongoing attempts to resist that training, that is exactly what he ultimately became. And he really doesn't like it. He really feels not great about it. Um, yeah, so Orson Scott Card sets up some like sequel material. It turns out that one thing that I found quite interesting is that it turns out that the buggers, not only do they have like non-analogous like physical traits, like they're much more, they're like ants. They're like big hyper intelligent ants. Um, and not only do they have very different like physical traits, they also have very different mental traits. Like, they can see, they can like share each other's thoughts and stuff like that. So I think Orson Scott Card is actually making this really beautiful point about the difficulty of an encounter with a truly alien other, because his point is that it's revealed actually that the alien invasion was basically a miscommunication. That, like, from the perspective of these ant-like creatures, they really, like, straight up did not understand that individual human beings are in any sense alive. Like, they would think of that kind of struggle as being like a struggle between ant colonies. It's like playing a game of chess. Like, the only piece that really matters is the king. And so they thought, essentially, that individual human beings, they don't really count. It's like the head human being, the queen human being, that counts. And so they were thinking of this as a struggle for territory and resources, but ultimately not one in which anyone actually gets hurt. And it turns out, when they found out that like all the people that they were killing, had minds, that actually, they really didn't like that. And they decided, okay, alien invasion's off. Like, obviously we can't kill these people because they're they have minds. Um, and so I think Orson Scott, basically, it's a big misunderstanding, and I think Orson Scott Card is gesturing um, towards this very like beautiful idea of the difficulty, or maybe even impossibility, of encountering a truly alien other and coming to any conclusion other than like, I must destroy this creature. Um, and ultimately, Ender, at the end of the book, he picks up the mantle of being like, explaining basically why these aliens were good. Like, it's a tragedy that we killed them, which is a very weird role for the like author of their genocide to pick up. But that's exactly what he does. Um, anyway, it's a really weird book. That's it. That's the whole plot. There's like a billion sequels. I have no idea what happens in any of the sequels. Um, it's a weird book, especially since it's such a violent book, and all of the violence happens between children. Ender kills two like human beings. You find out really late in the book that Stilson, the guy he fought when he was 6 years old, died. Like, his skull got cracked open and he was rushed to the emergency room and he didn't survive. So Ender straight up fucking killed a guy when he was 6 years old. And then there's another one that he kills and knows it. And it of course follows the same logic of, I don't just want to win this war, I want to win all the future wars. Which is why Ender rather than merely defending himself, escalates to the point of deadly violence. And he uses the empathy thing as well. Like he figures out that Bonzo Madrid, the guy who's bullying him, has a very strong sense of honor. So he uses that to force uh, Bonzo into fighting him one on one, and Ender is able to win by using like overwhelming force. Like he goes way beyond the expected norms of like hitting each other. We're like gonna beat each other up, but we're no one's everyone's walking away from this. He goes way beyond that, straight to like fucking killing a guy. Um, and yeah, quite a complicated character, very very interesting. I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the author of this book is a repugnant human being, and just a fucking terrible guy. I expected the book to be a lot grosser and weirder for that reason. Orson Scott Card is a extremely vociferous homophobe. Um, he believes or believed, maybe he's rescinded this belief at some point, but he believed that homosexuality should have the death penalty. That queer people should just be killed. Um, and when people criticized him on this belief, his defense of it was, well, I don't think that law should be enforced all the time. I just think if someone's being, openly gay, like that should have consequences. Which is just an insane. It's just an insane way to like think about things. And as one of my students pointed out, I wish I could give them an A just for making this observation. But considering how much of a homophobe Orson Scott Card is, it's really weird how like homoerotic a lot of the things he describes are. Like a lot of the male to male friendships that he has in this book come across as like romantic adjacent friendships, and also the way that he describes violence can sometimes come across as being like very sexual, which is especially uncomfortable because that violence is always happening between children. Um, yeah, weird, weird guy, weird, weird book. Um, let's see, what else did I want to say about this? Oh, I wanted to give it a ranking, so I'm gonna use the film the I'm gonna give it a ranking out of 5 and say if I liked it or not. Um, I think this is a 4 out of 5 book. It's pretty good, but it's not like mind blowing or anything. And I really did like it. And the thing that's kind of complicated here is that I think it's a good book, but I think it's a good book potentially not for the reasons that Orson Scott Card wanted it to be a good book. Um, I don't know. It's I feel like Orson Scott Card was aiming at a 3 out of 5 book that realistically presents like a possible future scenario for the human species and an interesting human experience. And it ended up as a 4 out of 5 book because he added all of this like weird shit that is coming from his psyche. It honestly just like would not be nearly as entertaining if this book had been normal. Like if this book had not veered off into like kind of bizarre territory sometimes, I don't think it would have nearly been nearly as good. And I liked it. I liked it a lot. I'm not sure I would have enjoyed it so much if I hadn't been reading it with a bunch of children. Like it's not the kind of book that I would just pick up on my own. But in the context of like reading this and explaining it to a bunch of 14-year-olds who hated every second of it, by the way, um, I think it was a lot of fun to read. So yeah, Ender's Game. Not sure I would recommend reading if you're an adult, but it is definitely an interesting book. Don't watch the movie. The movie's terrible. And all right, conclusion. What are some final thoughts this book left you with? You know, I guess the main like thing that I keep coming back to in my thinking about this book is that it's really good and it's written by a terrible person. And I don't think that you have to be a terrible person to make good art, but I think it can really help. Like like it's just odd to me that this guy's like weird like warped ideology and his kind of disgusting view of the world not only did not impede this work, but actually was absolutely conducive to it. Like his ability to realistically portray this like just disgusting and like violent, like dog eat dog type of, world, um is informed by his disgusting ideology. And I don't know enough about Orson Scott Card's actual beliefs to go into a lot of detail about the relationship there. Um, he's a Mormon who really, really hates homosexuals and has been extremely vociferous about that in the past, which doesn't really have like the same direct connection to this like one world government that he writes about. Um, and like a lot of the really disgusting stuff in this book comes from the way the prose is written. Like I can't describe it for you in the abstract because it's so like just present in every word in every scene, just in the way that he describes people like moving around and doing stuff and the kind of gross way that people talk to each other. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the book.